Welcome to the Maverick Paradox podcast, where we explore what it is to be a maverick and discover effective modes of leadership. I am Judith Germain, and my mission is to propel the maverick mindset into a world where character and integrity will ultimately have a higher premium than personality and bureaucracy. So thank you for joining me on this journey. And if you would like to continue, then please subscribe to my podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or one of the other popular podcast platforms. And today, our guest is Rob Peters. Tell me about yourself, Rob.
Well, I've been in the business world for 30 years. Started my career at IBM, trained as an IBM sales rep in large accounts, industrial sector, manufacturers in the 80s. Everything I learned in college and graduate school in the late 70s, early 80s, everything I learned has basically been tossed aside by this, digital world and social world we live in. So I've been a big believer in education and been going on a journey, but it basically started servicing and supporting clients face to face, belly to belly. So relationship building has been an ethos of mine for my whole career. So I've started with IBM and I've progressively worked my way out of IBM. And then I've worked for a large Capgemini, you're familiar with, a large consulting firm. It acquired a company I worked for, Canbay, which I used to go to India a lot, representing outsourcing services and captive centers in Bangalore and Hyderabad, India. So I learned a lot about international and travel and fell in love with London a number of years ago. And I have a big network in London and in the UK. So global view, big believer in relationships. And obviously when it comes to relationships, trust to me is such an asset that I created a business and career around evangelizing, a measurement of trust we call relationship capital, an open standard for measuring trustworthiness. So that's kind of what I'm kind of been evangelizing. And then we built a platform, and I'm sure we'll talk about it in our conversation.
Yeah, I found that really interesting because no matter where I was, I kept seeing the name Rob Peters. And I was like, who is this guy? So I ended up searching around, looking at the stuff, and I found such an alignment with what you do and the trust aspect. Because I find with leadership, there is so little trust. And people are really surprised that people don't want to follow them. And I say it's because you're not trustworthy. So it's interesting that you've designed something to measure trust. How do you do that?
Well, you just hit the nail on the head. There's being from the UK, Judith. I like to use provocative taglines and statements to kind of make leaders think. So if I could step back before I get into the measurement, kind of the why is. I say trust is dead in a business sense. I'm not applying standards of relationship capital for marriages or family. I wouldn't measure my kids, but some parents who've seen this platform want to hold their kids accountable. But I believe trustworthiness is alive and growing. And in business, Ronald Reagan, the president from many years ago in the United States, had a great term called, when he was negotiating the arms limitation talks with the Soviet Union, trust but verify. In a business sense, I believe you should trust your employees. You should trust your suppliers. You should trust your partners, but you have to verify. And you're not. And by the way, in this virtual world, you need to almost build a reputation and credibility before you even meet with a Judith or meet with a Rob, because if your reputation can't be found out, like you Googled me. How limiting is that going to be to your career or your business? So the measurement aspect is basically we're using declared commitments. We're asking you to on the platform when you sign up for an account, whether we're selling this to businesses, so let them control the relationship between the employee or the independent contractor with the business. But you could, as a solopreneur or as an independent professional, you could sign up and have your own subscription. Is basically you set up your account, you put your profile in just like a LinkedIn profile, kind of put your shingle up, what you do, what you're trying to do. And when you connect with people and you're networking with them or you're trying to collaborate with them, you start declaring commitments to each other. I will help Judith by introducing her to my partner, Tom Muscarello, who could use her services, maybe coaching around the Maverick. And then once I deliver on that commitment, you credit my account with relationship capital. You give me feedback. And it gets scored using gamification, points, badges, leaderboard to track it. We're about to go, we're looking at the financial case of using blockchain. The blockchain, every time you credit my account with relationship capital, it's a blockchain transaction. So it makes it a little bit more trusted. Blockchain is going to have a profound effect on trust from a business transaction. So that's a little bit about what we do. Very simple. Beyond creating commitments and getting feedback, you can also just appreciate people. Say, Judith, you did a great job with this conversation you had with me today. I just wanted to recognize you and appreciate you for this. And you get to get a badge and share that with your network.
That makes a lot of sense. I think it's quite funny because I've done a lot of talks around trust, and I say to people always see trust as a soft skill, and I've always said yes, it is a soft skill, but it's also a hard skill as well, and it can be measured. And I do get critical looks.
But the aspect of this, Judith, that you bring up a very good point.
Yeah.
There's a lot of yin and yang. There's a lot of the hard measurement of relationship capital. Traditional. Yeah. You're familiar with Dan Pink, and it's famous. I'm sure you are with your HR background. Is that part of this whole journey has been around building credibility and measuring it. And so it's not what I say about myself, though I'm pretty good at communicating. But how important is it the people you work with, the people that know you, what they say about you, and if you can share that with, especially when you're meeting a decision maker, if it's a potential client, potential partner, potential supplier, you can build so much credibility. You can move at the speed, as Stephen M.R. Covey talks about, speed of trust. You can move so much faster by having that already built, but it takes time. And I'm trying to use the platform to make that much more of a structured process, but fun, whimsical a little bit with the gamification. Because the millennial mindset wants to gamify it. They want their badges. They want their points. They want to be able to show that with their next employer, their next partner, some track record, right? And we promise part of the platform, no matter what, that whether you get off the platform after you're using it or you're using it for, we never get rid of the data. The data, your track record is already captured. So we think it gets more valuable the more users, the more people use it. And so that's a little bit about the platform. But you brought up something early in the introduction, and then looking at your background, the importance of integrity, the importance of character, the importance of principles. The one thing we learned, and I worked with a team of people across the world coming up with this industry standard of relationship capital way before there was a platform. Just how do we measure this? Everyone says that we build relationship capital when we interact with people or we lose it. Well, how do you measure it? Well, the one thing we learned is you can't build relationship capital consistently if you are not honest, accountable, responsible, respectful, supportive. If you don't have those values, those we call them guiding principles, you're going to have a hard time consistently building relationship capital. So the values, the principles, the character aspect of this is so critical. Because if you're a manipulative maverick or you're a manipulative person,
and I think that's
you're going to get found out on our platform.
I see there's two types of mavericks, the socialized maverick and the extreme maverick. And there are some important differences between the two. But one of the things that's different is the ability to influence, socialized maverick, or the ability to manipulate, extreme maverick. And I think that put the difference.
And that's a good point. I want to ask you tell me about Maverick, because I'm looking at you're on Amazon getting some snippets, but tell me about, because when I think of a Maverick, I think of someone who's like a bull in a china shop. They're brilliant. They're top performers. Many of them are top performers, but they cause as much collateral damage with the team as they bring to the table. But usually the managers let them get away with this behavior because they're top performers. Tell me a little bit more about first of all, how you came to this paradigm, this vision, and why, and talk a little bit about that.
Way back in 2005 when I was looking at Mavericks, I was really looking at the types of Mavericks you've been describing, which I now see more as extreme Mavericks. And I was having a real disquiet because as I was going through what are Mavericks and what are their attitudes and aptitudes. I saw a lot about myself, but I couldn't get with the extreme part. And I was like, yeah, but I do have a moral centre and I do have high integrity and these people don't. And like, so that can't be me. And then I suddenly thought, well, maybe there's more than one type of Maverick. And I got into it because I'm quite different from a lot of people around me. I see things differently, think differently. I deplore routine. I've got no time for all people that don't deliver if they say they're going to. I have a huge reputation, integrity is really high, and trust is really, really high on people. And I love going into challenging, novel areas. And then when it gets to steady state, bored, need to leave. And I found it was really interesting that there were these other people similar to me that no one could understand or no one could work with. And I went from being that maverick, lucky enough I had a socialised maverick boss who totally got me, moving to another organisation where they couldn't quite understand how to work with me. And then I moved into HR and I had to manage other people like me, and then getting bored and leaving HR and working for myself, and then realising actually what I really loved about HR was these difficult, challenging people that no one could work with, and then turning them around and seeing the wonderful things they could do. And I thought, well, who are these people? Yeah, and it's like people would be like, oh, this guy's terrible. So a typical scenario would be
you were coaching.
I don't know, someone in
So
sales,
as an HR professional, you were coaching
marketing,
people. Sounds like.
And they were bringing in loads of money. But in terms of HR, you would see this destruction. So people would be crying and litigation, and people would be going, you need to sack him because it's costing us all this money. And then other people saying, but he's bringing in all the money. And when you work it out, it kind of neutrals out, we're still in a high. And I'd look at it and go, yeah, but you just need to, and I'd go and talk to them, not threaten them. And we'd just go and talk and have a chat and work with them. And then they were fine. And people would be like, well, how did you do that? And I was like, isn't it obvious? And it wasn't until afterwards I realised actually it isn't.
You were ahead of your time, Judith. You were ahead of your time because most companies that I know of, most cultures, they'll tolerate a maverick, top performing salesperson for a period of time, but then eventually they'll just sack them. They won't even coach them. They won't even try to turn them around. And we know it's a much more team oriented. Well, sales, it depends on the what product or service you're selling. It's much more of a team sport today. But you just made me think of something that ties to your experience. So one of the things that, and I hope this resonates with you. So I give a lot of presentations to executives. So I had a chance to speak to 150 CEOs a couple of years ago in downtown Chicago. I stole this from Dov Seidman, founder of LRN, a very strong organizational coach, change man, and consulting firm he owns, one of the leaders. And I used this with these CEOs and it blew their minds away. So I said, I asked all the CEOs at the beginning of my presentation to raise their hands if they knew who their top performers were. All 150 raised their hands. They all know who are bringing in the revenue or cutting costs. They knew who the top performers were. Then I asked them to keep their hands up if they knew who their most principled top performers were, the people who got results in the right ways. Only 5 of 150 kept them up. So what does that say? I asked the question, if you could answer that question, if you could know who your most principled top performers were, would you have a more sustainable business? And they all raised their hands. So this is on their agendas right now because they're bringing in money, but injecting relationship risk because the salesperson's a jerk or the vice president of marketing is he gets up in front of a customer setting and comes across as very hostile. This is risk. This is operational risk. And it's having great products and great services isn't enough anymore.
However, what all types of Mavericks want is a boundary. And they want a boundary because they want to decide whether they want to live with the boundary or not. But they need to know where it is. Right? And the thing with extreme Mavericks, especially because they are very good at what they do, very, very successful, very manipulative, people become afraid of giving them the boundaries and they just keep pushing. This extreme Maverick keeps pushing, and there's no boundary there. So then they become more and more wild, more and more extreme. And I think, so times I've been in organisations and I've said to them, if it came down to it, would you sack this individual? If they say no, I'll challenge them. I'm not saying go and sack them, But there needs to be some sort of boundary. If you're not prepared to go as far as sacking them, you'll never change that person. But if you're prepared to do it, then you can change it.
Well, and most likely, even if you sack them,
Yes.
right? Even if you sack them, you may not change them, right? What you're talking about, I think you're probably even smarter about this than I am. You're talking about emotional intelligence, EQ, right? How many top performers don't have self-awareness, or they don't have the empathy to care what the other person or thinks, or the team thinks? It's about them. It's selfish. It's we got Donald Trump is a poor example of a leader, right? He doesn't care about other people. He's pretty clear about that. It's selfish and it's egomania. It's ego, right? And but like you said, we deal with those extreme mavericks because they're bringing in the money. But I don't think that's going to be the case much longer. They get found out. The clients don't like working when the team doesn't. They get rejected, and I don't think they can keep that type of behavior going if they want to grow a business or sustain. I don't think it works.
The thing with extreme mavericks, they have a cognitive understanding of it, but their emotions, their own emotions, blind them to their own self-awareness. So whilst they know how to manipulate somebody else's emotional throughput, they don't realise that their decisions are being heightened or not due to their own emotional awareness. And socialised mavericks are much more reflective and analytical and objective. So I was having a conversation with a client the other day, and I was saying that the difference with socialised mavericks is that when they're listening and working out a problem, it's kind of layered, and the first layer, they take all emotion out of it. So they just analyse the pure data, whether that data is written or whether it's just a conversation. And once they understand what's being said or what's been written, they then layer the emotion on top. But the emotion from the other person, it helps them to decide whether they believe that person. From the emotion, do I believe what you're saying? How much does it matter to you? All this kind of stuff. So, but in the decision making, they're very objective and they have no ego. So whilst they be certain that they are right, if you can provide evidence from someone that they respect, they'll go, okay, yeah, totally wrong. I agree with that now. But other different types of people find it really difficult to do that because they become emotionally attached to whatever's going on. And I think that's probably the biggest difference, because socialised mavericks, immediately somebody else opens their mouth, they're listening with no ego. No ego at all. No.
And I bet there isn't. I bet many extreme mavericks aren't self-aware of what their top 5 guiding principles in their life is.
Yeah.
I find the people who are very good collaborators, very successful team players, can wear the leadership hat when they need to, and then know how to be a good follower. And I think you need to be able to do both today in a changing world. And the example was, God, this was 16 years ago. I was on my alma mater, DePaul University, was having an MBA event with a bunch of CEOs on a panel. And Melissa Giovanoli, who was a founder of Networlding, a very values-based networking consulting firm she had, hosted it. And I knew her, and I'm on the front row of this event, live feed on our local TV station in Chicago. And she asked me, anyone want to be on the panel with these CEOs? And I raised my hand, and she picked me, and I didn't know what the event was really going to be discussing. And she asked me, Judith, right off the get-go, what are your top 5 values? In 2002, I wasn't very clear about my values.
Oh my God.
Take care of my customer. As far as, and I usually have no problem talking, and I was like babbling, and it was all being recorded live for 6 o'clock news. And I didn't sleep that night. I had to think about what my guiding values were: honesty, accountability, responsibility, support, respect. These happen to be the ones that we chose for building relationship capital. And so this is the self-awareness I talk about.
Yeah.
I bet extreme mavericks, very few of them have. If they have self-awareness, then they're going to have a conscience, which is going to push them to be more the socialized mavericks, unless they're sociopaths.
A certain set of behaviours. It's not ingrained. It's a choice. Because if you give them a compelling reason to be different, then they will. Whereas my understanding is with a sociopath or a psychopath, it's just, here they are. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's ingrained. This is what they are.
But if you mentioned extreme mavericks are good manipulators, I bet if you did a psychological demographic or kind of
Yeah.
put them in their buckets, you're going to have
Yeah.
extreme mavericks trying to look
Did you write my
like
book?
social mavericks. They'll come across as having all the EQ. And once you meet them, but when you start working with them, then their true wolf comes out. I've been talking about this for years. I mean, obviously, I'm a big believer in measurement, and if I talk about trust, right? It's trust. But what this platform and what I really am trying, I guess what I really do, but if I bring anything to the table is I help build credibility.
Mm-hmm.
If you're credible, you'll be trusted in a business sense. Again, I'm not trying to be take this to nonprofits. I'm working with for-profit businesses. Now, I spoke a couple years ago to the Chicago School of Psychology, and they loved it. Psychologists were. I showed them the platform a couple years ago. Gave a demo. I'm thinking, how do these psychologists
I was talking about
and many of them go into HR going to view this? They see this as the future. You're trustworthiness is going to be measured. Do you agree?
There's going to be a time where if you haven't got the reputation, if you're not credible, if you're not trustworthy, and which is not the same as being trusted, you won't work. And they were just looking at me like,
you're in a different planet.
And I think whilst we're not quite there yet, we are definitely moving towards that. And I think that's probably why corporates are really struggling, because the management isn't set up on a trust framework. You've got the baby boomers that, moving through to retirement, who were, command and control primarily. You've got the Generation Xers, which is the smallest population group, who started to make some changes, but kind of accepted the way it was, but kind of made some changes. And then you've got these Generation Ys or Millennials or whatever you want to call them, and they want what the Maverick wants. But the problem is they don't necessarily have the skill base. But then when you look at it, you think, why should they not have a manager that they can trust? Right? So those, for example, no Maverick would work for someone they don't trust and respect. They're out of there. So if they it's just madness. But
that's the number one reason people leave, right? People leave their jobs because of their managers, not because of their companies. Typically, it's their direct manager.
And now millennials, they know. I'm not quite sure in the States, but in the UK, they're not likely to get their own house until they're 40 plus. They're going to be renting. They're going to. We've told them that your job isn't going to necessarily be that meaningful. You have to do a menial task. In this country, there's a lot of people who work for 0 hours. I don't know if you have that concept in the States where basically you just work. Okay. So they're not going to. But that's the choice. So in this country, often 0 contract basically means you will work for us.
I think we all do to some extent. We have to give away some of our collateral to get the opportunity to get a paid gig, right? I see more and more of that.
This week you're working 30 hours or none, but you need to be available. Yeah.
And that's why, and they talked about this on the RSA, because I watched the RSA. I subscribe to that, and the RSA is phenomenal. I'd love to speak at that group. But that's a good point you make, is that we don't reward virtue. Capitalism typically doesn't reward virtue. And I believe all relationships are personal today. Business relationships have always been personal, but we used to be personal was over here in one sphere, and business was over here, and the twain never met. We kept them separate. I acted a stupid person as a leader in my business, and I was a devoted father at home. Well, guess what? You can't have both. No one believes that behavior. And so if that's fused, and we're not going to a less transparent world anytime soon, then you'll be found out. So transparency, openness, support, caring about other people, the soft skills of empathy. Again, I believe, and you'll love this, I should assume you'll agree with it, I think we're going to more of a feminine mindset.
They've reached high enough in their careers.
Women do this better than men.
Then what's on the way up? There's a cost to it because other men see them as weak, although there's a complete strength there because, you're well connected, you have integrity, people will follow you, but you're not dominating the conversation because you're far more subtle than that. And that can have a social cost, especially if you're in an organisation that's set up in a way that really only rewards hard measures.
And then we're in a transitionary time where I totally feel that. I've been talking about this for 15 years. So like you have, and I'm way ahead of my time. The CEOs looked at me 5-7 years ago like, what are you talking about? Command control, top down. But that's a different world. We don't live in that world anymore. Look at what the effect that social media is having on business. Just people venting. If you do something that's against the customer or the tribe, they speak out. They'll vote their dollars by walking away from your business in a heartbeat. And the problem is we got many baby boomer or senior executives who don't quite get this world, right? They're used to more tangible financial performance, but pursuing financial performance by itself actually destroys value. The numbers show it out. So if you're not just about making money and you're actually about trust and other relationships and relationship capital, if you can integrate relationships and results, I think you have a more sustainable, you will definitely have a more profitable, faster growing business because customers will stay with you longer. Partners will stay with you longer. Top performing employees will stay with you longer. The data shows it.
And yet it was okay.
And I'm just surprised it's taken so long.
This isn't going to be able to continue. These guys have to talk to people. And whereas now, you'd look at it now and you'd say, what do you mean he can't? You would never hire an IT person who couldn't talk to an internal or external stakeholder. They just wouldn't survive.
Well, you might. If they have great blockchain skills, and there's very few of them, you'll deal with a person who doesn't have good communication. I was working for a consulting firm where I was supporting Chase Bank. Well, it was Bank One, and it was First Chicago 20 years ago, Judith, and they had this hundreds of millions of dollars being transacted by the hour in this old mainframe system. And there were only a handful of people in North America who knew how to maintain this software. And a number of them were Russians. And so we brought a couple outside consultants in, contractors, to do the work. One didn't even speak English.
Yeah.
But but you'll deal with it because they, in a technology enabled world, if it got rare skills, companies will deal with it. It's just not, it is outlier, but it's not as much outlier as it should be. But because you got to have the skill, you got to have competency. You have to have a skill. But you also today you have to have good intent. You have to have a mindset because people don't trust you right away. You can have great competency, but if people don't think you have good intent towards, in the United States, the majority of citizens don't believe companies, their employers, or their products and services they're buying, that the companies behind them have good intent. How about that?
Probably good you're leaving. And I was like, why is that? And he goes, you're too honest to work here.
You're pretty close. We're not so different.
So, because he's like, you're always stopping me from doing what I want to do because, you're too honest. You have too much integrity. And I just went, thank you very much. It just confirmed it's the right decision. It's a nightmare. It's quite cool.
Wow.
Rob, I think we'll stop there. I can't even believe how fast the time has flown by. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I don't want to be on that boat's going to sink at some point. I don't want to stop there,
and then if you'd like to, you can come back another time. What do you think? Thank you once again for tuning into the Maverick Paradox podcast. I hope you have enjoyed listening to my conversation with Rob as much as I enjoyed having it. If you would like to learn more about Mavericks and leadership, then please subscribe to my podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or one of the other popular podcast platforms. Alternatively, apply to join the Maverick Paradox exclusive Facebook group, and my website is maverickparadox.com. Find out how willful independence can ultimately change all our futures. Thanks again, and see you soon.